What's good? It's Woog. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're into the fight talk. In easily the best boxing match since the COVID pandemic, WBC #1 contender Dillian Whyte is set to fight former Olympic gold medalist and two-time world title challenger Alexander Povetkin. Now pay no attention to the BS interim title on the line here. This is a great matchup, but these WBC, WBA, and other sanctioning bodies are really whoring out their titles. It's bad enough that there are 4 major titles in circulation, obscuring who the true champ of any division is. But now you've got super titles, regular titles, interim titles, handed out by each sanctioning body. It's really whack and it's misleading. Anyway, there is a BS title on the line that's not worth mentioning. What is worth mentioning is that the winner of this is supposedly getting the next shot at the actual WBC world title once the smoke clears between Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder, and Anthony Joshua. And Kubrat Pulev if he spoils the party for Anthony Joshua. The plan is for Fury to fight Wilder a third time, defending his WBC and lineal titles, Joshua defending his 3 belts against Kubrat Pulev, then if Fury and Joshua both win, for them to fight each other. But there's a dispute on who gets the next crack at Fury. Is it Anthony Joshua if Fury gets by Wilder, or is it Dillian Whyte? So there are actual stakes to this Dillian Whyte versus Alexander Povetkin fight. So when thinking about this fight, I'll first say this. I would take a prime Alexander Povetkin over Dillian Whyte. Povetkin's only 2 losses came via decision versus the decade-plus long dominant champion Vladimir Klitschko back in 2013, and then 2 years ago versus Anthony Joshua via TKO in Joshua's DAZN debut. In a fight where Povetkin had a lot of early success, outboxing Joshua and damaging him with some explosive power punching, blooding his nose and mouth up, Joshua had to dig deep in figuring that one out. And since then, Povetkin's had a win over Tyson Fury's brother, Hughie Fury, and a draw versus Michael Hunter Jr., son of former heavyweight contender Michael the Bounty Hunter. My late great-uncle, Oliver Tucker, known to us as Uncle Odie, was actually buddies with Michael the Bounty Hunter, and they actually used to train a little bit together in Los Angeles. But in that Povetkin versus Michael Hunter Jr. fight, Hunter came out of the gate strong, blitzing Povetkin with fast combinations that Povetkin had some trouble handling. Povetkin got back into the fight, got his wits about him, and it ended up being very competitive through the distance. Now on that same card, Dillian Whyte fought Mariusz Wach on short notice after his PED suspension was overturned, he being Whyte's, and Whyte came in looking out of shape and rusty. He won the fight, but he looked as bad as I've seen him look in recent memory. Now I'll give Whyte the benefit of the doubt here, and I'll look at that fight as the anomaly and not indicative of the Dillian Whyte that we'll be likely to see here versus Povetkin. Whyte has now been the #1 contender for the WBC belt and a top 4 to 5 ranked heavyweight, and according to Ring Magazine, somewhere between top 3 and top 5 ranked heavyweight, basically since his decision win versus former WBO champ Joseph Parker 2 years ago. And he's been wanting a crack at Fury or Wilder since. And he's been wanting a rematch versus Anthony Joshua, who gave him his only loss in a fight where he sustained a fight-altering injury back in 2015, before Joshua even became champ. And to be clear, both Joshua and Whyte have improved since. I think I'm leaning Dillian Whyte in this one, although I do not think he should be a 3-1 favorite against someone as explosive as Povetkin, who can also fight pretty hard for a whole 12 rounds. I just can't get away from Povetkin being 41 years old, about a decade older than Whyte, 32. And like I said, if this was prime Povetkin, the Povetkin who knocked Mike Perez, then highly touted out of Cuba, out cold, then I would pick him to win, possibly by TKO. Now the same Mariusz Wach that Whyte looked unimpressive against in his last fight, big guy, got knocked out in the 12th versus Povetkin back in 2015. Basically, if you weren't the best, Klitschko, then Joshua 5 years later, you weren't beating Povetkin. He's decision Chagayev for a lesser belt, knocked out Carlos Takam just before that Perez knockout, Takam almost made it the distance versus Anthony Joshua and would have made it the distance were it not for a bad stoppage, which to me felt like a way to keep Joshua's perfect knockout record going at the time. Bad stoppage. Povetkin was legitimately finishing fighters of that quality. That's why him fighting to a draw with Michael Hunter Jr. is kind of concerning. Now granted, we don't know yet how good Hunter can be at heavyweight. His only loss throughout his career was at cruiserweight to Alexander Usyk, one of boxing's pound for pound best, who also just jumped from cruiser to heavy. So that being Hunter's only loss tells us that the jury is still out. So maybe Povetkin fighting him to a draw will later prove to not be as big a red flag as it seems now. But I've got to go with Dillian Whyte, who's at a now or never crossroads in getting another shot at a major title. I think he'll win this by decision. The wild cards here are Whyte's weight, Povetkin's power, Povetkin's age, and also how COVID affects PED testing, VADA, USADA, and so forth. I don't know if the testing is as stringent as it is under normal circumstances. Boxing is still kind of reintroducing itself, so I don't know if the protocol is as tough as it has been in recent years. I think Whyte's going to show enough movement to simply win more rounds than Povetkin. If he avoids eating the hardest of Povetkin's powerful right hands, he should emerge on top here. But let me know your thoughts. Am I downgrading Povetkin prematurely? I mean, 41 is 41, and he relies on power, explosiveness. I think Whyte should know what he needs to look out for, but maybe I'm underestimating the skills and the craft of the 41-year-old former gold medalist. We'll see. I also can't complete this fight analysis without mentioning that both Whyte and Povetkin have been busted for PEDs. Whyte twice, although the recent one was overturned just before his last fight versus Vok. He'd also tested positive back in 2012, very early in his pro career. Povetkin tested positive just a week before his scheduled fight versus Deontay Wilder, a fight that they had to cancel due to the PED positive test. Wilder was actually on the flight to Moscow, Russia when he learned of Povetkin's failed drug test. That was very disappointing. I was looking forward to that one. Dangerous fight for Wilder at the time is how I viewed it. Obviously a very dangerous fight for Povetkin as well, because Wilder's Wilder, but I think a lot of people were sleeping on how big a threat Povetkin was in that one. Wilder was like a 1.5 to 1 favorite over Povetkin. That could be merited, but some of these odds just kind of go to show you that sometimes the boxing public or the boxing betting public really doesn't know what the hell they're talking about. There are actually some really good opportunities to kind of come up and to take advantage of the lack of knowledge in people placing these bets. One boxing channel that I recommend for that is Dwyer Boxing. Richard Dwyer, look him up on YouTube. He also has a couple websites, but check out his YouTube. I view it all the time. Big fan. Richard Dwyer Boxing. Sick channel. But yeah, in terms of the PED use between these two guys, it's tough to tell which of these two fighters has benefited more from the banned substances. But it's something to consider, especially since one of these guys is on the wrong side of 40 years old, and he hasn't scored a knockout since fighting David Price in early 2018. But please, leave your thoughts in the comments, like the video, and subscribe to the channel if you're into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.